Okay, you can begin.
Okay. So good evening, everyone. So today we'll be talking about leading with integrity and moral purpose. So our colleagues just presented a really amazing presentation on teams and having a group. But what is a group without having a strong leader? So this is what we will be touching a little bit on, how being a strong leader influences everything. So in today's complex and fast-paced organizational environments, leadership is not merely about achieving results, but about how those results are accomplished. Ethical leadership, grounded in integrity and moral purpose, ensures that leaders' decisions and actions reflect consistent values and prioritize the well-being of others. Leaders with integrity build trust and credibility, with moral purpose provides the why that drives decision making beyond short-term gains. This summary explores the key principle of ethical leadership, including the integrity, moral courage, ethical decision making, and the creation of ethical organizational cultures, highlighting how these elements collectively shape effective and responsible leadership. So now we'll be giving an overview of the chapter. So the main focus is the relationship between ethics, integrity, and leadership, how moral courage shapes decision making, building ethical organizations and communities, developing self-awareness and consistency in values. So ethics as the foundation of leadership. So let's start with the main idea. Ethics is at the heart of leadership. This means leadership is more than just telling people what to do or setting goals. It is about how we achieve those goals. So leadership is more than achieving results. It's about how the goals are accomplished. Ethical leaders align values, words, and actions, creating trust and credibility. Leadership is shared. Anyone in a team can influence ethical behavior and foster an ethical culture. So according to the writers of Exploring Leadership, every action a leader takes has ethical implications, whether it is a little or a major decision. So it's a question for the class. Why do you think people respect leaders who act on their values even when it's hard? Anybody want to answer? So I'll just answer for you then. It shows authenticity because when a leader stays true to one's beliefs, it tells others that I can trust this person because they're not just saying what sounds good. They actually believe and live by what they're actually saying. So a good leader prioritizes values like honesty, fairness, and respect, in addition to results. People trust you when your words and actions are consistent with your principles. When you say one thing and do another, trust evaporates quickly. And that is a main thing in being a leader is trust. So a good leader, ethical leadership also recognizes the leadership is a shared process and it's not a sole responsibility to any single person in power, and everybody in the group can act with integrity and contribute to an ethical climate, which I have said before. So an example. So think about a manager who preaches teamwork, but always takes credit for everyone else's work. I believe at some point in our life, we had encountered something like that, whether it be at work or school with projects or anything like that, where you do all the work and someone else tries to take the credit. So would you trust that person? Probably not, right? So that's a simple example of how losing ethical consistency damages credibility. Ethical leadership is also about shared responsibility. It's not only the leader who is expected to act ethically, and everyone in the team or organization contributes to the ethical climate. So next we'll be talking about understanding integrity. So let's talk about integrity. It's one of the most important qualities of a good leader. The word integrity literally means wholeness or being undivided. In leadership, that means the same person in public and in private, and there's no double standards, no fake images or anything like that. You're not trying to be one person when you're outside, and when you're is a completely different person. You are the same person inside out, basically. So a person with integrity is consistent, trustworthy, and transparent. Basically, you see what you see is what you get. So let's go through what that looks like in action. So they act accordingly to their values. So even when no one's watching, they stick to their values. They tell the truth and are authentic, not pretending to be someone else. And they take responsibility. When they make mistakes, they don't shift the blame. They say, they take responsibility for what is done. And they stay reliable under pressure. Even when things get tough, you can still turn to them and have that conversation based on that. So for example, think about Malala. Even after being attacked, I don't know if you all heard about Malala. After being attacked and shot in the head by a Taliban, she continued to fight for girls' education because that is what she truly believed in. She showed integrity by standing firm in her values despite their risks. So why do you think people find it hard to admit mistakes even when they know it's the right thing to do? Integrity doesn't mean perfection. It means striving to live according to one's principles, acknowledging human fallibility and learning from ethical missteps. Everyone slips up. What matters is owning up, fixing it, and doing better next time. It also takes courage because living with integrity can sometimes be inconvenient or unpopular. But those are the moments that show who you really are. So, like Nelson Mandela, he upheld equality despite decades of imprisonment, is another example of someone who shows integrity. So, on the next slide, these are some pictures of the people that we were talking about who actually show some of the examples who actually show integrity. So next we'll be talking about moral purpose, the why behind leadership. So moral purpose is what gives leadership direction and meaning. It reflects a leader's deep desire to serve others and contribute to the common good rather than self-interest. While integrity is about being consistent and honest, moral purpose is about why you're doing what you do in the first place. Leaders with moral purpose aren't driven by fame, money, or personal success. They're driven by a deep desire to serve others and make a positive difference in their community or organization. So according to Exploring Leadership, the book Exploring Leadership, moral purpose helps leaders stay grounded in their values, even when things get tough. Leaders with moral purpose are guided by clear ethical convictions, make decisions based on long-term impact, not short-term gain, seeks to improve lives, communities, and systems, treat others with respect and dignity. So think of someone like Nelson Mandela, which I've shown in a picture before. His moral purpose was equality and reconciliation. Even after being in prison for 27 years, he led South Africa towards unity rather than revenge. His leadership had meaning because it served the greater good. So, what do you think happens when a leader loses their sense of moral purpose? So, when a leader loses their sense of moral purpose, they often lose direction, trust, and credibility. Without a clear purpose, a why, leadership becomes more about personal gain or power. That's when leaders start making decisions based on what benefits them, not what's right for the team or community. Moral purpose transforms leadership from a position of authority into a calling. It connects the leader's inner values to the outer world. This sense of purpose sustains leaders through moral challenges and social change, helping them stay anchored in their principles. Ethical dilemmas and the decision making process. So now let's talk about something that every leader, really every person faces: ethical dilemmas. Ethical dilemmas are inevitably in leadership. Ethical dilemmas are inevitable in leadership. They happen when our values come into conflict and there are no clear right or wrong answer. For example, leaders often face choices like honesty versus loyalty. They may think to themselves, do I tell the truth, even if it hurts someone I care about? Fairness versus compassion. Do I treat everyone equally or show leniency because of someone's situation? Efficiency versus equity. Do I make a quick decision that helps most people or take more time to ensure everyone is treated fairly? So, can you think of a situation where you had to choose between doing what's right and doing what's easy? So, imagine you're a team leader and one of your best friends is on the team and it starts showing up late and not pulling their weight. So, do you report them like you would anyone else, like honesty, being honest and being fair? Or do you protect them because they're your friend? So, you show loyalty and compassion. That's a classic ethical dilemma. Neither choice feels completely right. When this happens, leaders need to use reflective judgment. That is, they should not rush to react. You pause, think carefully, and weigh your values before acting. To help with that, there's a 6-step ethical decision making model. So, in this, there are 6 steps, as I just said. So, firstly, we'll be talking about identify the ethical issue. So, what values conflict? Then you'll gather facts. What do I know? How do I need? What do I need to know? So you consider the stakeholders. Who will be affected? Evaluate alternatives. What are possible options and their moral consequence? Make a decision. Act based on well-reasoned ethical principles. Reflect. Review the outcome and learn from it. This process encourages dialogue and shared responsibility rather than isolated decision making. Consulting others builds accountability and wisdom. So, which one of these 6 steps do you think most people skip and why? So, the answer is the other step people often skip is the first one: identifying the true ethical issue. Sometimes we jump straight into solving the problem without fully understanding what values are in conflict. So, ethical principles to remember. Now that we've seen how leaders work through ethical dilemmas with using these 6-step process, It helps to remember some of the key ethical principles that guide those choices. Non-maleficence. Do no harm. This means that as leaders, we should avoid actions that causes harm to others, whether emotional, physical, or social. Beneficence. Promote good. It's not enough to just avoid harm, but good leaders go a step further to make positive change. Justice. Be fair. Justice means treating people equally with the respect, regardless of their background or position. Fidelity. Fidelity is about trustworthiness and commitment, following through on what you say. For example, if a leader promises transparency or feedback, they must deliver it. Breaking trust weakens moral credibility. Together, these four principles remind us that ethics isn't abstract, it's applied through our daily actions and choices.
Okay, thank you, Miss Ali. Everybody hear me still? Hello?
Yes, we are.
Okay.
Yes, we
So we're now moving on to moral courage. So moral courage, what does that mean? It can mean standing up for ethical principles despite risk or opposition, everyday acts, speaking truth to power, challenging unethical practices, admitting mistakes, defending fairness. Without courage, integrity remains theoretical. With it, integrity becomes actionable. So let's get into it. Moral courage is the willingness to stand up for what's right, even when it's risky or unpopular. It's easy to talk about ethics and the values, but moral courage is what turns those beliefs into actions. So, why do you think people stay silent when they see something wrong? I would say fear. Fear is usually the reason. Most people worry about losing their friends, their jobs, or even being judged. But moral courage is about choosing what's right even when it's uncomfortable. Without moral courage, integrity just stays a nice idea. But with moral courage, integrity becomes real leadership. Moral courage doesn't always mean dramatic or heroic acts, but it could be something like helping lead a protest or rescuing someone. It doesn't have to be very powerful, it could be small. So you could be speaking up when you see unfair treatment. This could be in the workplace or in school. This could even be admitting when you're wrong. I, for one, struggle with this. I don't like to admit when I'm wrong, but we should. Refusing to cheat or lie, even if others doing it. Like if you're in an exam room, which I have been in a lot of these past weeks, I've seen people cheat, and it's like, damn, maybe I should cheat too, but don't. Calling out unethical behavior, even if it costs you popularity. So again, you might see somebody cheating in class, and you might want to call it out because it's not fair, but you will become more popular in the class because like, why are you snitching? So, moral courage is not dramatic heroism, it's often everyday acts of integrity, speaking truth to power, admitting errors, challenging unethical practices, or defending fairness. Without moral courage, integrity remains a belief. Integrity becomes action. Now, let's look at some 8 assumptions about ethical leaderships. The authors identify 8 guiding beliefs that shape ethical leadership. 1. Ethics is the heart of leadership. Leadership cannot be separated from moral responsibility. 2. Leadership is values driven. Every act of leadership reflects underlying beliefs and priorities. 3. Personal and organizational values must align. Ethical tensions arise when leaders' personal values conflict with their institutional goals. 4. Ethical leadership can be learned. Moral reasoning and ethical sensitivity can develop through reflection, education, and practice. 5. Ethical thinking must lead to action. Knowing the right thing is not enough. Leaders must do the right thing. 6. Character development is essential. Ethics depend on a strong character built through integrity, empathy, and humility. 7. Ethical leadership is a shared process. Everyone in a community has a moral agency, not those in power. And 8. Everything leaders do must teach others. Every action, big or small, models values for followers and shapes organizational culture. Now, let's look at some classical ethical theories in leadership. There is virtue ethics by Aristotle. Then we have deontology by Kant, utilitarianism. Oh my gosh, sorry. Utilitarianism by Mill, and leaders can combine frameworks for balanced moral reasoning by Ballengren. These are the men we'll be speaking about. Okay. So now that we've already talked about moral courage and the assumptions behind ethical leadership, let's take it one step deeper into the classical ethical theories and explain why people make moral choices. Virtue ethics by Aristotle. Virtue ethics focuses on who you are rather than what you do in one moment. So Aristotle believed that ethics is about developing good character through habit and practice. Ethical leaders don't just make one good decision, but they consistently act with honesty, fairness, and courage and kindness until it becomes a second nature. It focuses on character and moral habits. Ethical leaders develop virtues such as honesty, fairness, and courage through practice. So, deontological ethics by Kant. This word deon comes from the Greek word meaning duty. Kant believed that ethics is about doing your duty, following moral rules, and not about what's easiest or what benefits you. According to Kant, you should do what's right because it is right, not because it makes you look good or helps you avoid trouble. The outcome doesn't matter, your intentions do. We can use Rosa Parks as an example. When she refused to give up her seat, she wasn't thinking about the outcome. She did what she thought was morally right. So Kant's message is ethical leaders act from principle, not just convenience. Utilitarianism by John Stuart Mill. This theory says that the best decision is the one that produces the great number of the greatest. Let me say that over. This theory states that the best decision is the one that produces the greatest good for the greatest number. It's all about consequences. You weigh the results of your actions to minimize overall happiness or well-being. We can look back and see this during the COVID-19 pandemic when governments made tough choices like enforcing lockdowns. That caused a major inconvenience for a lot of people, but it aimed to protect the majority of health, the majority of the society. So leaders using this approach would focus on outcomes and impact instead of what may just be inconvenient for some now. They look at it as it will help the overall group for the future. But what challenges this? What challenges this is that just sometimes, it can harm a few if it benefits many. So it needs to be balanced with moral principles. So these three theories can give leaders a different way to think about right and wrong. But moral leadership research shows that no single theory is perfect on its own. According to Ballengard, effective leaders often combine these ethical frameworks to make better moral judgments. For example, they use virtue ethics to check their character and intentions, deontological ethics to follow moral duties and rules, and utilitarianism to weigh the consequences for others. So rather than choosing one of them, one theory, leaders today blend them for balanced moral reasoning, making decisions that are both principled and practical. So we're moving on to transformational leadership theory and connection. Now that we've looked at the classical ethical theories and explained how it helps people decide what's right and what's wrong, let's look at these ideas come to life through transformational leadership theory. So the theory was developed by James McGregor Burns in 1978, and it focuses on how leadership is not about power or control, but it's about inspiring moral growth. So, according to Burns, transformational leadership happens when leaders and followers raise each other to high levels of morality and motivation. In other words, both sides grow together. It's not just a one-way relationship. One example we can look at is Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who showed transformational leadership by using compassion and courage to unite people around justice, not through power, but through moral conviction. Transformational leaders don't lead through authority or fear. Instead, they lead through value like fairness, justice, honesty, and compassion. The authors in our text explain that transformational leadership connects directly to authentic leadership, meaning leadership that is real, transparent, and grounded in moral purpose. When leaders act with integrity and authenticity, people trust them. That trust creates collaboration, unity, and long-term change. So transformational leadership reminds us that leadership isn't about big actions. It's about daily choices and honest communication. And that's what brings us to our next topic, moral talk versus moral muteness. This explores why speaking openly about ethics is so important for maintaining integrity and leadership. So moral talk versus moral muteness. Ethical leadership thrives in spaces where people can talk openly about moral changes, not hide from them. This is what we call moral talk. Moral talk means bringing ethics into everyday conversations, like asking questions like, is it fair to everyone involved? Are we being transparent? Does this align with our values? When leaders and team members talk openly about what's right and what's wrong, they build a culture of trust and accountability. Now, on the other side, there's something called moral muteness. Why do you think people sometimes choose to stay silent even when they know something is wrong? This happens when people stay silent. This happens when people stay silent about ethical problems, usually because they're afraid of conflict, losing popularity, or being seen as difficult. So imagine you're in a work office and your supervisor is taking credit for all your colleagues' work. You feel it's wrong, but you say nothing because you don't want to cause trouble. That is moral muteness. And it's how small acts of dishonesty can grow into bigger problems. Silence doesn't avoid conflict, it creates moral decay. When people don't speak up, unethical behavior becomes normalized. Building and sustaining ethical environments. Ethical culture is intentionally built. Leaders can model ethical behavior consistently, reward honesty, transparency, and courage, implement systems promoting fairness and accountability, encourage feedback and reflection, confront ethical behavior directly. So, ethical leadership actually shows up in real life through building and sustaining ethical environments. Ethical workplace or communities don't just happen by accident. They're intentionally created and maintained by leaders and followers together. An ethical environment is one where people feel safe to tell the truth, trust their leaders, and know what doing right is the thing to be valued, not punished. So, how do leaders create that kind of culture? Leaders can model ethical behavior consistently. Leaders have to show what ethics look like. People learn more from what you do than what you say. If a leader wants honesty, they must be honest themselves, even when it's uncomfortable. Two, Reward honesty, transparency, and courage. It's not enough to just say we value integrity, but you have to reward it. So when someone speaks up about a mistake or raises an ethical concern, leaders should thank them and not punish them. Create systems that reinforce fairness and accountability. Leaders need systems, not just speeches, to ensure fairness. That includes clear codes of conduct, fair evaluation policies, and transparent communication. Three, encourage feedback and reflection. Ethical environments thrive when people are allowed to question and reflect and share their ideas without fear. Leaders who regularly ask, how can we do things better, or was that the right decision, build self awareness in their teams. Confront unethical behavior directly and not defensively. Finally, ethical leaders don't ignore wrongdoing. They address it directly but not respectfully. No yelling, no cover ups, just honest correction. Such environments promote trust, psychological and safety, and collective responsibility. They empower individuals to act ethically and speak up when something feels wrong. So let's look at the connection between integrity, purpose, and authenticity. So we bring in everything together now. Leaders who act from on authentic values inspire others to do the same. They lead not through control or authority, but through a moral influence. Their credibility enables collaboration, shared purpose, and long-term trust. They act the same way they do in public versus in private, and they stay true to their beliefs even when under pressure. That's what gives them credibility, and credibility is what inspires others to follow willingly. Think about Mahatma Gandhi or Martin Luther King Jr. Their power didn't come from position or authority, it came from authentic moral influence. People followed them because they trusted their integrity and their purpose. Authenticity in leaderships mean you live your truth, your values, your purpose, your principles, even when it's difficult. Ultimately, leading with integrity and moral purpose means acting consistently with ethical principle, having the courage to do what's right, encouraging others to engage in moral reflection, and using leadership to serve, not to dominate. Leadership without integrity lacks legitimacy. Leadership with moral purpose transforms individuals and organizations and communities. So, the key takeaways we want to look at are leadership is an ethical relationship built on trust and shared purpose. Integrity means consistency between beliefs, words, and actions. Moral purpose gives direction and sustains ethical commitment. Ethical leaders balance reflection, courage, and compassion. Every leader shapes the moral culture through actions and choices. Ethical leadership is practiced through everyday behaviors, not just big decisions, and combining integrity, the how, and the moral purpose, the why, builds trust and lasting impact. So, leading with integrity and moral purpose is not optional. It is the foundation of effective, sustainable leadership. Ethical leadership requires consistency between values, words, and actions, guided by a clear moral purpose and that prioritize the common good over self interest. Leaders who cultivate moral courage engage in reflective, ethical decision making and foster open dialogue to contribute to organizational cultures of trust, fairness, and accountability. By aligning personal and organizational values, modeling ethical behavior, and encouraging moral reflection in others, leaders inspire commitment to collaboration and long term positive impact. Ultimately, leadership grounded in integrity and moral purpose transforms not only organization but also gives the communities and individuals what they serve. It also gives the communities and individuals they serve. That's it. This is our references.
Thank you so much for listening. So I hope that with this presentation, by showing us how to become leaders, effective leaders in organizations and groups, as well as our colleagues' presentation on how to be effective group members and develop teams, that you all can have good takeaways from this and be better in your next team or group work project, or even in future when you have to take on leadership roles. So thank you so much again for listening.